Very good morning. We are live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa wins re-election as president after a troubled vote. Opposition rejects the result. Multiple shooting in US as gunman kills 3, himself in racially motivated shooting in Jacksonville. 7 people injured at a mass shooting in Boston. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to share his thoughts in Mann Ki Baat today. It will be 104th episode of the monthly radio program. Star javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra to vie for gold at World Athletics Championships in Budapest, Hungary. DP Manu and Kishore Jain also in the fray. So Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has been re-elected for a second term. The country's election body has said Mnangagwa's party ZANU-PF received 52% of the votes. The party has been in power for over 4 decades. Mnangagwa's main opponent Nelson Chamisa won 44% of the votes. Zimbabwe's election was marred in controversy in opposition parties alleging rigging.
Mnangagwa Emmerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party has received 2,350,711 votes out of 4,468,730 valid votes cast, which are more than half the number of valid votes cast in the presidential election.
The United States has witnessed multiple shooting as a white man armed with a high-powered rifle and a handgun killed 3 black people at a Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida on Saturday before shooting himself in what local law enforcement described as a racially motivated crime. The suspect, whom Jacksonville sheriff described as a white male wearing a tactical vest, was not identified. The sheriff said all 3 victims, 2 men and a woman, were black. The authorities believe the shooter acted alone and that before the shooting he had authored several manifestos for media, his parents and law enforcement, detailing his hatred for black people. Police described his weapons as a Glock and an AR-15 style rifle with swastikas on it, referring to a lightweight semi-automatic long gun often used in mass shootings.
Jacksonville has suffered the loss of 3 precious lives at the hands of an active shooter. This afternoon, a little after 1 p.m., an individual we have not yet officially identified entered a Dollar Tree in the Newtown area of Jacksonville, outfitted with a tactical vest, armed with an AR-style rifle and a handgun. Then the shooter killed 3 people before turning the gun on himself, taking his own life.
A 48-hour ultimatum given to France's ambassador to Niger by the country's military rulers on Friday is about to expire. Since seizing control of the government on July 26th, Niamey's new regime has been at loggerheads with several Western powers and the region's bloc ECOWAS. DD India's Isaac Lucando has more from Dar es Salaam.
The clock is ticking for Sylvain Ité, French ambassador to Niger. Apart from his impending departure, his country's influence in the West African nation is also on the line. In recent weeks, there has been growing opposition to the presence of around 1,500 French soldiers stationed there. The soldiers had been helping ousted President Mohamed Bazoum fight a growing jihadist insurgency. Amid growing anti-French sentiment, Niger's foreign ministry has now asked France's representative to leave. However, French authorities countries remain defiant against the military junta that ordered the diplomat's expulsion. The French Foreign Ministry maintains that only a democratically elected government would have the authority to remove their ambassador. This latest development follows a threat of military action by French-backed regional bloc ECOWAS if last month's coup is not reversed. The bloc, which has rejected a plan to return to civilian rule in 3 years, says military intervention is still an option. But analysts note that any use of military force in Niger is risky and likely to further destabilize one of the poorest nations in the world. Isaac Lukando in Dar es Salaam, reporting for DD India.
And former US President Donald Trump has raised nearly $20 million in the past 3 weeks, a period that roughly coincides with his indictment in federal and state cases connected to his false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. Since appearing on Thursday to have his mugshots taken in a racketeering and fraud case in Atlanta, Georgia, the former president brought in $7.1 million. Trump spokesman Stephen Cheung said on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. On Friday alone, Trump brought in $4.18 million, making it the highest grossing day of his campaign so far. Trump, who was elected president in 2016 but defeated by Democrat Joe Biden in 2020, is again seeking the Republican Party's nomination for the president. Trump is currently facing 4 indictments related to his false claims that the election was stolen and the January 6, 2021 attack by his followers on the US Capitol in Washington, D.C. All right, in Haiti, fleeing gang violence, residents of the Carrefour neighborhood in Port-au-Prince abandoned their homes and set up a camp at a local gymnasium. Despite there are not enough tents nor food for everyone, displacement victims said returning to their homes was an unlikely option. Strong gangs that control vast portions of the country are to blame for acute food shortages, murder, kidnappings and pervasive sexual violence in Haiti. The UN estimates at least 2,439 people have died and about 2 lakh have been internally displaced since the beginning of this year. Now, the share of foreign-born workers in the United States has reached a record high according to data from the US labor market. Last year, people born outside the US made up 18.1% of the overall labor force, the highest level since 1996. Indians represent the second largest immigrant group in America after Mexicans and contribute billions of dollars to the US economy. DD India's Sally Patterson reports from New York.
Spectrum analyzer basically sees if there's energy, what the energy is at different frequencies. And
for decades, Indian migrants have been building the infrastructure needed to power the US economy. At this laboratory in Brooklyn, engineers are designing solutions to some of society's most pressing challenges using wireless technologies, from making smartphones smarter to modernizing medical equipment. The Indian labour force is more proficient in English, earns better salaries, and has higher education levels than other immigrant groups in the US.
Many of them had an excellent education, and so they could immediately plug into the American economy, especially in STEM, but in other areas as well, and help the process of pushing their respective fields, whether it's medicine, engineering, and you'll see them overrepresented there.
But it's not just the sciences. Indian immigrants have helped bolster American industries, including the arts, retail and manufacturing, while, of course, keeping everyone well fed.
Let's not forget the political realm. And I think that's been an area where we've seen a number of changes over just the past few years, where there's really a movement across the country to elevate more people of Indian origin into positions of political power. And I think a lot changed for the Indian community when Kamala Harris became the vice president, because as we now know, she is the daughter of 2 former international students, one of whom was from India. Her mother was from India and her father was from Jamaica.
International students were on the agenda when US President Joe Biden welcomed India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the White House in June. With Indians on track to become the country's largest foreign student group, The leaders committed to strong ties in higher education and research partnerships. The Biden administration also pledged to make it easier for Indians to live and work in the US, something the nation has relied on throughout its history.
A couple of centuries ago, there were Indian immigrants who came to the US to build our railroads. But then there was a drop in Indian immigration. But just focusing on what's happened since the 1960s, which was the last time that there was comprehensive immigration reform in the US, most Indians have come through the pathway of what we might call skilled immigration in the US.
But advocates stress the flow of labourers is only possible if mechanisms for entry are in place, such as streamlining the H-1B visa process, which is being trialled in a pilot project. From scientific breakthroughs to cutting-edge technology, Indian immigrants have made a colossal contribution to the US economy, generating innovative solutions for generations to come. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
All right, now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Thousands of people participated in a march in Washington, D.C. to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech in 1963. In March 1963, thousands of people gathered in the U.S. Capitol to call for an end to discrimination based on race, color, religion, and sex. Detractors and supporters of Chilean President Gabriel Boric gathered in front of La Moneda presidential palace in Santiago over alleged corruption cases in the Chilean government. Hundreds of anti-government demonstrators marched to the government palace demanding for the president to resign. Earlier this month, Social Development Minister Giorgio Jackson resigned after accusations that members of his party were involved in a scandal involving multi-million-dollar transfers of public funds. Elections have been held in Gabon to elect the country's president. Gabonese President Ali Bongo is eyeing for a third term. 6 major opposition parties have backed a joint candidate in an effort to challenge 56 years of rule by Bongo and his family. All right, with this, we'll slip into a very short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India Live, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva says UN Security Council needs changes. Tens of thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's planned judicial overhaul. Three Ukrainian military pilots killed when 2 L-39 combat training aircraft collided over a region west of Kiev.
Always welcoming. The vibe of Punjab is larger than life. Warm up to grandeur that's beyond compare. And history that's dotted with tales of bravery. Smiling soul of India, where music, art, cuisine and culture comes together to create an unforgettable impression. Punjab is all set to win your hearts with its unique and colorful extravaganza.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has called for changes in the United Nations Security Council during his visit to Angola on Saturday. Criticizing the current UN Security Council members, Brazilian President has asked for reforms in the international body. He also urged for more inclusiveness for other countries in the Security Council. Now, Israeli protesters took to the streets on Saturday to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition government's judicial overhaul in Tel Aviv. This marked the 34th straight week of demonstrations calling for all the planned judicial reforms to be scrapped. The protesters are saying that the proposed changes would significantly weaken the power of the Supreme Court. Earlier in August, Israel's apex court began hearing the first in a series of appeals linked to a judicial overhaul undertaken by Netanyahu, which has set off an unprecedented crisis in the country. Now, Moscow claimed to have thwarted more Ukrainian attacks against the Russian capital as well as regions bordering Ukraine. In Belgorod region, Russia says Ukraine carried out a cluster munition strike, injuring 6 civilians. And in the eastern Ukrainian region of Kharkiv, 2 people were killed and another wounded after Russian shelling hit a cafe in the village of Podoli. DD India's Dasha Charnishova reports from Moscow.
In yet another attempted drone attack against Russia, air defenses intercepted a Ukrainian drone that was approaching capital Moscow early Saturday morning. It fell northwest of the city in Istra district, causing no damage or casualties. Belgorod region, which borders Ukraine, also saw Ukrainian attacks by drones and shelling. Local authorities say cluster munitions were used by Ukraine, injuring at least 6 people. In the meantime, Russia says it has improved its positions on the Kupiansk direction. Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, has claimed that Russian opponents in the West are ignoring signals from Moscow and pushing everyone towards the Third World War. Separately, Russian volunteer formations, groups contributing to the execution of the tasks given to the armed forces, territorial defense units, are now obliged to swear an oath to the Russian flag. The Russian president signed an order aimed at, quote, forming the spiritual and moral foundations for the defense of the Russian Federation. Fighters now must pledge their loyalty to Russia, strictly follow their commander's orders, and preserve constitutional order. Dasha Charnishova reporting in Moscow for DD India.
Now, 1239 trainer aircrafts collided over a region west of Kiev on Friday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky offered condolences to the families of the pilots. During an address, Zelensky said 3 Ukrainian pilots died in the accident in Zhytomyr region in central Ukraine, including a Ukrainian officer, Andriy Pilshikov. He added an investigation is underway and certainly all circumstances will be clarified. Zelensky is counting on swift training of Ukrainian crews to fly up to 61 F-16 fighter jets promised by his Western allies.
Yesterday, a catastrophe occurred in the sky of the Zhytomyr region. 3 pilots lost their lives. Among them was Andrei Pilshikov, called sign Jews, a Ukrainian officer, one of those who greatly helped our state. Very much so. My condolences to the family and loved ones, to everyone who knew the young men. An investigation into what happened is ongoing. It's too early to discuss details. Certainly, all circumstances will be clarified. Of course, Ukraine will never forget anyone who defended the free skies of Ukraine.
And since Moscow's departure from the Black Sea grain deal, a second ship has sailed from the Ukrainian port city of Odessa for Bulgaria on Saturday. Ukrainian lawmaker Alexei Honcharenko said the Liberia flagged bulk carrier Primus was moving from Odessa to the port of Varna in Bulgaria. Odessa's 3 seaports shipped tens of millions of tons of grain during the war. Since then, missile volleys and kamikaze drone attacks by Russian forces have been directed at Ukrainian ports. Now moving on to Romania, one person died and 33 were injured after two explosions at a liquefied petroleum gas station in Crevedia near Bucharest on Saturday. After the first explosion, the fire spread to two tanks and a nearby house, causing evacuations within a radius of 300 meters and a blockage of road traffic. According to the agency for emergency situations, some 25 fire engines took part in extinguishing the fire. 4 people were intubated after suffering severe burns. A second explosion took place at the LPG station on Saturday evening, injuring 26 firefighters. Arafat said the fire had not yet been extinguished and more explosions could happen as a third tank at the site posed a risk. Now, increasing countries are protesting against Japan for dumping nuclear polluted water into the ocean. Japan's reckless release of nuclear contaminated water from the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has triggered worldwide concerns and opposition for the posing risk to the marine ecosystem. In South Korea, over 10,000 protesters gathered in downtown Seoul as the country's main opposition, Minju Party, held a rally condemning Japan's discharge. Meanwhile, hundreds marched in Fiji's capital Suva, strongly protesting the Japanese government's Fukushima nuclear contaminated water release. Alright, now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address the 104th episode of his monthly radio program Mann Ki Baat. The telecast of program will start at 11 a.m. Indian Standard Time. The program will be broadcast on the entire network of Akashwani, Doordarshan, the Akashwani website and the News on Air mobile application. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also address the B20 India Summit 2023 in New Delhi today. The 3-day summit began this Friday. The Business 20 is the official G20 dialogue forum with India raise responsible, accelerated, innovative, sustainable, equitable businesses. The summit will be attended by over 1,500 delegates from about 55 countries. The flood situation in India's northeast state Assam is likely to deteriorate as the weather department has issued an orange alert. Over 35,000 people, at least 71 villages in 7 revenue circles in 3 districts are still reeling under flood waters. 21 relief distribution centers were opened in Dhemaji and Chirang to serve the flood-affected people. Now, the PM Jan Dhan account launched in 2014 completed 9 years, and in these 9 years, it has reached a milestone of covering 50 crore people into the formal banking sector. To talk on this achievement, DD India correspondent spoke to the Secretary, Department of Financial Services, Ministry of Finance, Vivek Joshi.
As India celebrates 9 years of Jan Dhan account, we have crossed about 50 crore accounts in this segment. This was launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi about 9 years back. I am joined by Finance Secretary Vivek Joshi ji. Welcome to DD India. How do you look at the reasons for this scheme to be such a grand success? In the last 9 years, I mean, we are touching 50 crore accounts right now. So what are the reasons behind this success?
So there are, many reasons for the success of this scheme. This has been the grand vision of our Honorable Prime Minister, and he launched this scheme on 28th of August 2014. And in 9 years, we have been able to achieve around 50 crore accounts till August 2023. And that is very satisfying. And many agencies of the government, outside the government, have worked it to make it as a public campaign, people's movement, and that is why we have been successful to come up to this number.
Now that we have touched 50 crore accounts, what next for the ministry? What are you targeting? Maybe another 50 crores in the next 5 years?
We look at the total number of accounts and the total population of the country, then we will see that we are almost near saturation. So, covering another 50 crore is slightly tall ask, but So if we look at the total number of accounts, including these 50 crore account, they are approximately 160 crore. Whereas our population is maybe approximately 136 crore or 137 crore. I mean, it's anybody's guess. So we are near saturation, but still there are people who need to be covered under this scheme. They need to be opened their account. Each year we are adding almost 3 crore new beneficiaries into the fold of this scheme. And we will continue doing that, for which we take various campaigns at different points of time. We just finished one campaign in last July. We propose to do another campaign from October. In these campaigns, we not only cover this Jan Dhan accounts, but we also motivate the participants of these scams for enrolling themselves in PMJJBY and PMSBY, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Yojana and Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi, for joining us, and wish you many more success in this sector. And we at DD and India also wish that this Jan Dhan account, which is a noble cause taken up by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to include the marginalized section into mainstream banking and financial services. With camera person Kumar Dutt, this is Dibyendu Mondal for DD India from New Delhi.
All right, moving on to sports now. Star Indian javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra looks set to secure the World Championships javelin throw gold medal. Neeraj Chopra progressed to the men's javelin throw final at the World Athletics Championships 2023 after topping the qualifying round. Chopra produced a season's best throw of 88.77 meters with his first attempt to gain a direct entry into the final scheduled on Sunday. The dramatic qualifying mark was 83.00 meters. DP Manu and Kishore Jena are also in the fray as they also qualified for the finals. Indian shuttler HS Pranoy won the bronze medal in the BWF World Championships at Copenhagen. Pranoy started strong against Kunlavut with its son, but lost to world number 3 by 21-18, 13-21, 14-21. This is the first medal for Pranoy at the World Championships, while it is the 14th World Championship medal for India. And the Indian women's blind cricket team scripted history at Birmingham. India won gold medal by defeating Australia in the rain-curtailed finals of the International Blind Sports Federation World Games. The women in blue remained undefeated, having won all their league games in the tournament. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated the team on winning the medal. On social platform X, formerly called Twitter, he wrote, and I quote him, "Kudos to the Indian women's blind cricket team for winning the gold at the IBSA World Games, a monumental achievement that exemplifies the indomitable spirit and talent of our sportswomen. India beams with pride," unquote. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.